Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Spice, the show that aims to put a little spice into your life in a quick 30-minute podcast. Now, Mari and I are really happy to have nabbed our guest today. In fact, I saw her yesterday give a talk in a school with 100 sleepy high school students, and she woke them up like nothing.
Really?
Yeah, and in fact, speaking of school, Mari, have you done your homework?
Oh, I did. I did read part of the book. So anyways, let's tell them who is our guest
Okay,
tonight.
so if book was a hint, our guest is a top Filipino book author, well, she's an author, who lives in the UK. Her first book, which we have here, called Tall Story, has already won 13 awards, including the Crystal Kite Award in Europe. And her second book, which Mari is holding up now, well, there's Tall Story. Doo-doo-doo. Yes.
And the second one,
Shine, has just also won the same award, the Crystal Kite Award, and is actually being nominated for the prestigious Guardian Children's Fiction Book Award. That's right. So we're welcoming on the show top multi-awarded young adult book author, Candy Gourlay.
welcome, Candy.
Lovely
Hi.
to see you.
Thank you for coming. So, can you tell us how did it all start? How did you become a child's book writer, a children's book writer? Sorry.
How did I become a children's book writer? I've always wanted to become a children's book writer ever since I was little. The day I learned how to read, I wanted to become a children's book writer. And but it took me a long time to get there because first I became a journalist, and then I married an Englishman and moved to England. Then I brought up my kids. And when they were little, I started to have aspirations to write picture books and things for younger children.
Oh, there's you and your husband.
Oh my
Take a
goodness.
look at you. Go, Candy.
Those were the days. It's so depressing. Look at that.
No, you're just as fabulous.
Thanks. I'll pay you later. Yeah, and then when my kids were babies, and I was reading all of these picture books to them, I thought, hey, I can do that. I'm a professional. I do journalism. Surely it will be really easy to do children's books. Look at them. They're so easy. So I started doing it. And then I started writing these little picture book type stories. It wasn't easy at all. It's really, really tough. It took me 9 years to get published.
Wow. In fact, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because you're so multi-awarded now, but we know it wasn't an easy road.
No. And multi-awarded, you said I won 13 prizes. I didn't win them all. I didn't win them all. I was nominated for 13 prizes.
Okay.
That's still an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, it's fantastic. I'm so proud of that. But I'm more proud of the fact that I've actually produced the book, and there it is. It's been published.
But
That's right.
What made you actually keep on writing children's book? Because 9 years with many no's, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, a child
kept
asked me
you
that
going?
today. I'm on a book tour. So today I visited 2 schools, and one of the children asked, "Why do you keep doing it?"
Yeah.
And I found it really hard to answer the question because I have not really thought about why I keep doing it. I mean, I do it because that's what I do. And in fact, my husband notices when I'm not writing. He notices because I become very unhappy. I become bitter and twisted and grumpy, and I'm not normally a grumpy person.
Right.
So I have to write. That's why I write. And if I hadn't gotten a book deal, I would still be writing. I think I would still keep going.
Now, I understand that it took about 5 years, each novel, for you to start to finish.
My practice novels. So I wrote 3 novels before I got published. And they were like practice novels. I would call them practice novels now. But at the time I was writing it, I thought I was writing like the Filipino novel, and that it was going to get published and I was going to get famous right away. And I was wrong. In fact, they're good. They were good practice. It took me a long time to write those.
Right.
But Tall Story, in fact, only took me 10 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a leap from 5 years to 10 months.
Sometimes it's all about the book. And Tall Story, for some reason, it kind of came out fully formed. One of the characters, if you remember, there's a little girl character there. She just started speaking. I felt like I was doing automatic writing. I'll sit at the computer and put my fingers on the keys, and this character would just start talking. It's like it's very spooky.
Right.
Yeah.
And
the harder character was the other character. The boy character was a bit harder to write.
Why don't you share in a nutshell what Tall Story is about, so our viewers can get interested, and if they haven't read it, they can buy the books.
Yeah, well, Tall Story is about a little girl named Andy, and she loves basketball. But she was born in the wrong country. When you write a book, you have to give the character a really big problem. So she's passionate about basketball, but she was born in the wrong country. She was born in London, where there is no basketball whatsoever. So she has nobody to play with. She tries to join a local team, and they're only boys, and it's terrible. And then her mom says to her, her mom is a Filipino nurse in London. Her mom turns to her and says, "Hey, your brother in the Philippines, who you've never met, has finally got a visa." And she goes, "Great." And the mother said, "Well, just a minute, your brother is tall, you'll be ready, okay? He's kind of tall." And, what's wrong with being tall? That's great. That means we can play basketball. Because of course Filipinos love basketball. And then the brother comes, and he's not tall. He is a giant. He's 8 foot tall, which is, so he suffers from a disease called gigantism.
And that's where the conflict comes in with the story.
That's where the conflict is, because she wanted something and she didn't get what she wanted, and he just wants a little sister, and his little sister's rejecting him, and it goes like,
it's a
What
fun
about
read.
Shine? Can you tell us a bit about Shine?
Yes, well, Shine, I had kind of a, shall I tell the funny story about Shine, what I was trying to write?
Please.
Right, yeah.
So when I started writing Shine, it was vampires were all the rage. And Twilight just came out, and there was Stephanie Meyer raking it in. Everybody was buying and reading Twilight, and I thought, I want a piece of that. I want to be a little bit. I want some money, give it to me. So I thought, okay, I will write a vampire story. And then I thought, well, it has to have something Filipino in it. I'm Filipino, and I believe that I have to put the Filipino in the books. Every time I write, it's got to have Filipino in the books. But okay, well, we've got a vampire monster, the Manananggal. So I did this Manananggal story. Manananggal.
Have you heard of a Manananggal?
No, I've
You're
never
Brazilian. You have never met a Manananggal.
No.
I don't think they're very fun.
A Manananggal is this beautiful girl during the day, and then at night, she separates from her lower half. She sprouts big leathery wings, and then she flies off. Her lower half rips apart, and then she goes off and sucks the souls out of people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was my, and it sounds exciting, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote this whole book, and when I finished it, I hated it.
Oh my gosh.
I really hated it. Well, the thing was, you see, even though I had this idea and I plotted it out and I planned the thing, I don't read vampire novels. I don't find vampire novels exciting at all. Well, I don't want to disappoint my readers, but I'm sorry, I don't like vampire novels. So I don't read them, and there are some things that you've got to do when you write vampire novels. There are tropes you've got to follow, this because it has a certain readership. Readers expect certain things, and you have to do sexual tension, you have to have that reveal when the monster is revealed, you have to have the killing of the monster, and I didn't have any of those. I can't do sexual tension. I'm a good Asian girl. And so I came into the office, and to show it to my editor. This is my second book in a 2-book deal, and I was prepared for him to lash out and say, "You're fired. You don't know how to write. I quit. I don't want to be your editor anymore." And he said, "Candy, when you rewrite this book, don't approach it as a repair job. What you have to do is look at what's great about it." And he sat me down, and he told me what was great about it. I mean, I was just gobsmacked. Do you know that term? I was astonished, because he just picked out all the great things about the story. He said, "I like this character. She's really moving. I love that scene. Don't get rid of this part and that part." And I was just sitting there thinking, oh my God, I've never been edited like this before. And I realized at the end, I knew what I needed to write. And I went home and I wrote Shine. And Shine is a ghost story, but it's not really. It says at the beginning, it says, this book is not a ghost story, but there are ghosts in it. It is not a horror story, but some people might find it horrible. It's not a monster story either, but there's a monster in it, and that monster is me.
Oh.
Because it's about a girl who has a condition that makes her a monster in the eyes of the superstitious island that she lives in. And so she can't come out of the house. If she goes out, people will try to kill her or attack her. So she sits hiding in the house, and her life is lived out on Facebook. So she lives on us. It's a contemporary story.
Yeah.
But she lives in this strange island where everybody's really superstitious. And every night at sunset, she goes to the window and she lights a candle. Because in that island, they believe that if you light a candle at the window, it summons ghosts. And her mother has died, and she wants to summon her mother's ghost. And one day there's a knock on the door, and there's her mother at the door.
No, it's fabulous. I've actually read both, and they're such fun reads.
Thank
and
you.
in fact, your protagonists are often women, or little girls, or teenage girls, a little angsty, and something's hindering them. A situation is hindering them in life. Where do you think you tap into that to find?
Well, it's what you have to do when you're writing a book is you have to make life really, really hard for your character. If you're not making life hard for your character, you're not doing your job. So I think of a problem for my character, and I think, how can I make it worse? How can I make that problem even worse? So you have to be really, really cruel,
Right.
while loving your character at the same time.
And how much of your personal self do you put in the books?
Everything. I put my personal self into everything. In fact, my children recognize parts of me in a lot of the characters. So in Tall Story, I'm in Andy, I'm in Bernardo, I'm in the mother. And my kids say, Mom, the mother is just like you. She's so annoying.
Now, how has the international market taken to the Filipino aspects of the book?
Well, you know, when I started writing in England, I thought that what I had to do was write an English book and hide behind that and just not reveal that I'm a Filipino. Because when I grew up in the 1960s and 1970s, I'm revealing something there. When I grew up in the Philippines in the 1960s and 1970s, there was no publishing. I never read a book that had a Filipino in it. And because I was such a big reader and I was so passionate, I loved reading so much. When I saw that, I thought, maybe it's a law, maybe it's a rule that Filipinos are not allowed to be in books. I really thought that. And so when I started writing my first novel, there were no Filipino characters in it at all. But then an agent came up to me and she said, look, you know, I read your manuscript. I really liked it. You're funny, Candy, you can write. I said, so why didn't you take my book? And she goes, because you're Filipino. And I thought, is this my first experience of racism? And then she said, no, it's because look at your book and look at you. So my characters, there was English characters. It was set in England. It was about a war, World War II, in England and France. There were no Filipinos in it at all. And she said, as a literary agent, my job is to sell the book and the author. And there is no connection between this book and the author. How am I supposed to sell it? No connection. It's an English book with a Filipino author. And I realized that I was still that little girl who didn't believe that Filipinos could be in books. So I had to really bite the bullet and write a book that had a Filipino in it. And I had to tap into my experience growing up. And that book is an unpublished book. It was called Volcano Child. And it was set in the shadow of Pinatubo. And it was about a girl and a boy whose mother had gone to London to work as a maid. And I've done a lot of reporting about Filipinos living abroad, so I knew about what their stories were. And one of the typical things that I have I discover when I interview Filipinos abroad, women, is they will say, I left because I wanted to give a good education to my children.
Yes.
They say that. And then you interview them a little bit more, and then more things come out. And they'll say, oh, my father was so domineering. My husband beat me. I had such a bad time. You know, and you realize they're not running away they're not trying to, they didn't go abroad to make money. They went abroad to run away from certain aspects of our culture. It's kind of terrible to say. And the common thing that I found was they were running away from husbands. And I realized, I researched about it and discovered, well, we are the only country in the world now which has no divorce.
Yes, that's right.
We are the only country in the world with no divorce. And for these women, they're not Manila women. You know, in Manila, I think there's a lot more, people are more liberal. Women get away if they want to get away. These are women who come from the countryside.
Trapped.
And they are trapped. They cannot get away. And one woman told me her story. And when she left her husband, her village shunned her. because it was so unthinkable for a woman to leave their husband. It's a very strange country, our country, because it's very, very, women are quite powerful, but at the same time they are weak. They are not allowed to do certain things. And so when this woman experienced that, the only way that she could save face was to leave and work abroad. And when I realized that, I wrote this book, and I'll give you it's not published, so and the big reveal at the end is they thought that their mother left because she wanted to make money and help them go to school. At the end, she discovers that their mother left because she wanted to leave the father. Yeah, so that was the book I wrote. And when I wrote that, it was really hard to write because I experienced that. I experienced my father leaving in the 1970s to go and work in the Middle East. And it's quite a devastating thing. He was an architect. He couldn't get any more work, and he went off, and we don't know what he really did out there. And it was a very unhappy time for my family. And so I can tap into that. With my stories always have separation. There's a lot of separation. Right. Because I myself have left my family here.
That's right.
Yeah, so I can tap into that loneliness, that kind of separation, that homesickness and all that stuff. And that book, Volcano Child, I sent it out and it was rejected by everybody inside. But the rejections had letters from the publishers, and they said things like, oh, it really moved me. I was really touched. Oh, you can really write. It's so lyrical. And I was like, well, why are they saying these things?
Yeah, why are all these good things, but then publish it?
Why don't they publish it? And one of the publishers told me, well, it's a good novel. It's a quiet literary novel. And when you're a debut author, the first book has to be a book that makes an impact. It has to be a debut novel. I said, oh my God, now I've got to write a debut novel. So I did. I tried to write one which had some kind of, I wrote a dystopian fantasy. And again, tapping into that whole business of separation. And so it was called Ugly City. And the dystopia was that there was this city in which the law is the parents have to leave, but the children must stay. So the city is designed for children. And there are all these children who are alone. They're living in their own flats. They don't have to go to school if they don't want to. So for children reading that, it's really aspirational. They're like, I want to be there. But there are no parents. And that creates all the problems for the children because they have no parents. And that was rejected everywhere as well. However, it won a prize. It won. There was a prize for unpublished authors, and it was called the Undiscovered Voices, and I won that. And that was how I got my agent. So I got a literary agent at last. She tried to sell Volcano Child. She tried to sell Ugly City. It continued to be rejected. But I was used to it by that time. By that time, I had realized that why I was writing was because I just wanted to write. I couldn't do anything else. So I just kept writing. And I wrote my next book, which was Tall Story. And Tall Story was taken on by David Fickling, who is famous for discovering Philip Pullman.
Okay.
You mentioned that you really like reading, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know like a few of your favorite children's book beside yours.
I couldn't possibly name mine. But my favorite children's books. That's a really terrible question to ask somebody who loves books, because I really love a lot of books, like with a passion. I can't say that one is a favorite, but I have favorite authors.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love an author called Frank Cottrell Boyce. Have you heard of Millions? Have you seen that film?
No, actually.
Millions. It's a little boy who talks to saints. So he's always talking to saints, and everyone's like, this kid's crazy. And then one day, somebody throws a bag out of a train, and he's sitting there by the train tracks, and he finds this bag is filled with £1 million, British pounds. And he's got to spend it before the 25th of December, because in the scenario, Britain is about to convert from pounds to euros. So what happens when a boy has to spend millions of pounds in
what a great
so many
premise.
days? Oh, it's a beautiful book. And all of Frank's books are like that. They're heartwarming, they're really touching. I love his books.
Okay. Anyone else?
Anyone else? My other favorite author has to be a woman called Geraldine McCaughrean. And she wrote a book called The White Darkness. And it's called The White Darkness because that is the darkness you get in the Arctic. And it's about a girl who, her father's dead, and she's got this very, very, very suspicious uncle who takes her to the Arctic under false pretenses. He takes her away to the Arctic, and she has an imaginary friend, and her imaginary friend is an Arctic explorer who, you know, the guy who says, I might be, who leaves the tent and says, I might be sometime. And then he dies.
And never comes back.
Yeah, so he's her, so the whole book is her conversing with this imaginary friend. And the writer is very lyrical. I just like nice writing. This is beautiful writing. She manages to describe snow in a million different ways.
Wow.
And it's just
like an
beautiful.
Eskimo.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, in fact, Mari, we were asked as an assignment today to kind of share our own favorite children's books.
Oh, wow.
To kind of share a little of that. So you can start, Mari. if you want.
The one that I used to read so many times, I loved, was Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince.
Oh, The Little Prince.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
It's
beautiful.
such a nice book, and even though you grow older, you know, I wouldn't mind reading it again.
Right. No, it is. It's true. It's one of those that you read as an adult and you see different things from when you were a child.
My favorite part of that is when the snake, he says, this is what it looks like when a snake swallows an elephant.
Yeah.
Is it he swallows an elephant? As he looks like a hat. And he draws the snake and then there's this big lump and it looks like a hat.
Yes, that's right. Mine would actually be kind of similar in terms of the doodling is Charles Silverstein. And
I've heard of that.
Oh, mine would be A Light in the Attic, which is his book of all his different poetry and his doodles as well.
Okay.
Yes. So I think I started reading that maybe when I was 11 or 12, and it's just one of those books that I just fell in love with, and all the poems as well were very whimsical, but with some really nice meanings to them too, and very relatable to children. And then of course I got into Missing Piece Meets the Big O, which is his other book, and that's absolutely one of my favorites still today. I give it to people for relationships now, and it's a children's book.
Fantastic.
Okay. But yes, so to continue on, you talk about rejection a lot and like how you've been rejected quite a bit. Any advice you can give to writers out there, you know?
Any advice to writers out there? It has to be, if you're writing, you have to write for the right reasons. If you're writing to get published, that's the wrong reason.
If you're writing
You
for
have
money.
to be writing because you have a story. It's like me writing that book and I wanted money. See, that's the wrong reason. Oh my God, never write for money. First of all, there's no money. There's no money. There's no money in publishing. Yeah, it takes a long, unless you become like this big bestseller like Harry Potter, someone makes a movie, that's where the money
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
So, but you have to be lucky. I mean, how many people get their books turned into films? Not very
Yeah.
many people. So you have to write because you have a story to tell that you can't help but tell. And if you have that story to tell, you have to ask every question. You have to ask every question and follow it to the bitter end. Because what I find is when I have regular meetings with friends with writer friends, and we critique each other's writing.
Nice.
And what I discover from critiquing a lot of people is they might have a great idea for a story. They might be fantastic writers, but if they don't ask every question, the book always falls short. Because sometimes you say, oh, I can't be bothered to explore that strand. You have to explore that strand and write until you get to the bottom of it. And then cut. So that's how I do it. I write everything and then I cut out all of the things that don't fit in the story.
Right.
And what is the nicest thing a fan have told you?
What's the nicest thing a fan has told me? It has to be, soon after I was published, I had this really, really great friend who is a little boy who lives across the road from me named Hugo. And Hugo used to come over and then draw in my office while I was writing. You know, like he was also writing. He'd write like lots and lots of stories and make comic books.
How cute. How old was he?
He's lived across the road since he was little. So ever since he was little, we were always talking about stories and books. And then when Tall Story came out, he went up to me and said, Candy, you've got a book out. It's so cool. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, it's happened. You know, because it's that, when I was a kid, I remember the moment when I started reading. And what a fantastic moment that was. That I realized, there's a world out there and it's in books. And the reason I write for children is because I want children to have that same feeling. And when a child comes to me and says, I love your book, they've had that feeling. They've had that moment that I can't forget. So it's great.
And they get to meet you. I mean, did we ever get to meet our favorite children's authors as a kid?
I don't know. I wouldn't be so thrilled meeting me.
So, are you creative like every day, or there are days that you don't want to work and
There
you
are
have
really, really
to?
bad days. I'm not creative every day. I do find that I can write good. Well, I can write good for an hour. I can write well for an hour. at the most, and then the rest of it will be like fixing and adjusting. And so at most I would write 2 to 3 hours a day in the morning, and that's enough time to get a few words done. But I don't write very much a day. And then in the afternoon it will all be admin or fixing something rather than actual creation. It's hard. It's really hard, and you have to do all the research.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Now, I mean, we really loved hearing your stories, even the ones that weren't published. And, you know, in this day and age, there's online media as well. Is that something you'd look into to publish?
You mean like self-publishing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I thought about that. When I wasn't getting published and getting rejected, I thought, okay, the next step is self-publishing. But you know what? I think the people who self-publish probably have this little chip on their shoulder, because people are saying, oh, you're just self-published. There was no curator who said, this is fantastic, I will publish it. But things are changing really rapidly. There are some really good books going on. The media is changing. It's not just going to be books anymore. And there's a lot of cross-fertilization and trans-media. Things are happening at the same time in different forms of media. It's a very exciting and scary time. And I will never say never, but at the same time, all I want to do is write. And I don't want, if you self-publish, you have to be committed to selling it. And that's not, I don't want to sell. It's just like the last thing I want to do. I just want to write.
Can you tell us about your school visits, like the one you did for Cat's school, and how can people book you?
How can people book me?
Yes.
Well, on my website, there is a contact form, and all you have to do is write a note in the contact form, send, and it goes straight to my inbox. It's not like going through a secretary, because I just live in a cave by myself. Yeah, so I'll get the message, and you can ask me. But I'm not in the Philippines.
Yes, in fact, we're really lucky to have nabbed you during this trip. So most of your school visits are done abroad.
Most of my school visits are done abroad, and that's how I make my living. Is I charge for my school visits, and so I prepare. So it's all properly. I'm very professional with my school visits. I have my clicker, I have my PowerPoint. I am prepared for signing. I have a stamp so that the children, if they have no time, because usually when you go to schools, the children have no time to get an autograph. And I feel so sorry for them, because they're so excited and then they go away with nothing. So I have this stamp, and I stamp their arms as they go out. And the stamp says, I met an author today, Candy Gourlay Tolstoy. And it's sneaky as well, because they will come home and say, Mom, look at this. And the mom will say, oh, let's buy the book.
I love it. I hope you brought the stamp today too, because we want to get stamped.
You want to get stamped? You don't want to get stamped.
Yes, we do.
All the children go, stamp my forehead, stamp my forehead. No, I won't stamp your forehead.
Candy, before we wrap it up, can you please tell us who are your role models? Who inspires you? Yeah.
Who inspires me? Who inspires me? God, a lot of people inspire me. That's a really hard question. That's a really hard question. Oh, I can't pin it down. There is like a legion of people that inspire me.
There's someone off the top of your head that
I had an amazing editor when I was working for the Inquirer, Letty Magsano, and she was the one who told me, maybe we cannot be biased, but we can be fair. She said something like that. Anyway, I learned a lot of my basics from her. I have a really good friend named Mandy Navasero. She's a photographer. And she gave me the courage to do all kinds of crazy things. She would say, Candy, let's go and interview witches in Laguna. And we did. And then I have my best friend, Frankie Joaquin, who was a fellow journalist. She showed me how not to have a boring life. And she's always been my hero. And my husband. Well, you know, when you write a story, there's always a character who takes the hero by the hand and takes them off on adventures. And there are many, many characters in my life who've done that.
Beautiful. Last thing, why do you write?
Why do I write? The question is, why don't you stop? I can't stop. I just write because I have to.
Beautiful. Is there anything you'd like to share maybe with our viewers? Invite them to check out Shine before we go?
Yeah, do. I'd love it if you read Shine, and if Shine is now available. There you go. Shine is now available at National Bookstore, and I think in other bookstores, I don't know. But if you read it and you love it, please leave a review on Amazon. A 5-star review. If you hate it, please don't leave any reviews anywhere on the internet. Thank you very much.
Andy,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I love all of your stories.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we were able to, get you in the show
We
today.
did chapter today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Candy.
See you soon.
Guys, thank you so much for watching us. We'll see you next Friday. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Life Spice.
Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the New Media Factory. Some programs on this network might include strong images and language and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.